For me, entrepreneurship is about starting with nothing and creating an enterprise that has some kind of worthwhile purpose. Ultimately, that enterprise can, be a for-profit or a non-profit organization, but that's entrepreneurship, is that process of conceiving and then creating. So when I left Stevens, I started at Bell Laboratories, and I almost made it 3 years. And then I started my first software company. And that business grew to about 75 people. And I sold that business in 1994 to McAfee Associates. And at that point, I had this crazy idea that the internet removes geography as a constraint in where you locate a business. So my wife and I moved with our 3 young children at the time. We had a 4th after we moved to Montana. So I started that business in Montana. And people thought it was a crazy idea because, in fact, I had one gentleman who actually told me he deleted my name from his contact list when he heard that I had moved to Montana. Ironically, ultimately, he invested in our business later on. RightNow grew over a 14-year period into one of the world's largest websites in terms of traffic, one of the top 100 websites in the world. We provided cloud-based application software for large consumer businesses. And business grew to about 1,100 employees with offices all over the world, but our headquarters was always Montana. That business grew to a point where it made sense to combine forces with Oracle. So we sold RightNow Technologies to Oracle last fall, the fall of 2011, and that transaction's now complete. The Stevens education prepares people uniquely for the work environment. I mean, I think I noted 3 specific areas. One was, Stevens is such a rigorous academic experience that hard work in and of itself is inherently virtuous and worthwhile and intrinsically satisfying as well. And that's an advantage that Stevens graduates have. The second thing is that the Stevens education is very applied. And this is in contrast to some other engineering schools which are very theoretical. And I think that makes a Stevens graduate more creative in the work environment. And that's a real advantage as well. And then thirdly, I think the honor system teaches that there are no shortcuts to the finish line. And the honor system at Stevens, I find a lot of people in the workplace trying to look for shortcuts, and there really aren't any. So I think in those ways, the Stevens education probably prepares people better than a lot of other engineering schools in the country. I mean, technology is at the heart of things. And it's interesting, if you look at disruptive innovations over time, the same thing happens. Like when cars were first invented, some you had to start by rolling down a hill, some you had to get out front and crank them, some actually had a starter switch, and some had the accelerator on the steering column, some put pedals. And this is true of all technology innovation, whether it's automobiles, assembly lines, electricity, manufacturing, or computers and communications. That in the early stages of technology adoption, the technology itself is extremely visible. Well, flash forward to today. What's going on in technology today is technology is becoming embedded in everything. But if the technology is exposed, these products become very hard to use. And I take, for example, the Apple products, the iPads and iPhones and these sorts of things. This is beautiful technology that's completely applied. And the challenge we face today as consumers is that we're being overwhelmed by technology. But to be effective in today's world, we've got to harness the technology so it is a servant to the user as opposed to the user being a servant to the technology, which is where things tend to start. So I think that we're going to see more and more adoption of technology, but the challenge for engineers as we design these products and deliver them to marketplace is to really knock the rough edges off. In fact, make them servant to the consumer instead of the other way around. My advice to graduates from my own experience after graduating from Stevens in 1983 and spending the last period of time starting 5 different businesses was, first, I would encourage them to find work that's extremely challenging and at the very edge of their ability. Because one of the things I've learned is there's a lot more satisfaction in the outcome when the outcome was in doubt. An easy path doesn't lead to contentment the way a difficult, challenging path does. The other thing that I think is really important is that I think there's a lot of wrong-headed thoughts about how people start businesses. If you get 100 MBAs together and you ask them, how do you start a business? 100 will say, well, you write a business plan and then you raise money. What they don't say is they then start a bonfire and with the money, and they hope there's a company there before they run out of money. And the reality is that less than 1% of all the businesses that get started in this country each year raise professional money. So in all 5 of the businesses that I started without external capital, investment money, or a business plan. And what we focused on is finding a customer we could serve and understanding their needs. I call this bootstrapping. I had the pleasure of lecturing here at Stevens on bootstrapping. And I've written a book on the topic called Bootstrapping Your Business, which is basically, this is just common sense methods, but I think it's far superior and virtually the opposite of what is taught in business schools today. Bootstrapping is really about using customers' money and ingenuity to start a business. So like when I started RightNow Technologies, before I wrote a line of code of software, I called 400 prospective customers and tried to get an order, tried to get them to buy something. Now what was I selling? Well, I was describing a product that didn't exist yet. And the benefit of that is it could change in each conversation as I learned more. At the end of a month and 400 phone calls, I knew exactly what the customers want. I counsel a lot of entrepreneurs, and I can't tell you how sad it is to have an entrepreneur come in and say, I've been working 5 years on this product, I'm now ready to go to market, only to find out it wasn't the right product. In my business, the last one that I started, I spent this month making phone calls. Then I spent 60 days building the first product. And from that point forward, we were cash flow positive and we're able to double the revenue every 90 days for 2.5 years. So without any external capital. So I think bootstrapping is just inherently a better way. And one of the principles is you start with sales, not product development.